Hi there. This is another lesson about the way that national elections are conducted. And we're returning to the 270towin.com website to show us a little bit about how it works. In our previous lesson, we talked about the electoral map, and we discussed how each state has got a certain amount of senators and congressional representatives that when they are added up will give a vote total for that particular state. New York, Texas, and California are the largest states in population and also have the most weight in the election. Now here we have the map set to blank with nobody winning at this point. But we know that there is history and precedent, and so we also created a map that talked about the last 6 presidential elections, the 2 Clinton, the 2 Bush, and the 2 Obama elections that have occurred since 1992. So with those 6 elections, it turns out that there are 10 states that have voted Republican in every one of those elections. And there are 18 states that have voted Democratic in each one of those elections. So what that ends up with is a total of 242 states. This is, we can kind of consider a starting point. 242 votes that are at the starting point for the Democrats, 102 at the starting point for the Republicans, with 194, which is of course a lot, that are left undetermined. And each of these states have swung to both Democrats and Republicans across the last 6 elections. Now, there is a website that, this same website helps us to see what those previous elections were. And so we're going to go through those real fast. So let's look at the 1992 election. This was Bill Clinton's first election, and in it you can see that he garnered 44, almost 45 million votes versus the incumbent, President George H.W. Bush, who had a little less than 40 million. Clinton had 370 electoral votes. 168 went to President Bush. Now, remember, it takes 270 to win. And where that 270 is determined is that whenever you look at the entire map, there are 538 votes. And so, if we cut that in half, then we will have 270 that are going to be necessary in order to win. That will be just over half of that original 538. So this is what happened with Clinton's first election. So he won all of these states. Now, notice this is rather similar to our default map of the states that have voted consistently in every election. We can see that it is rather similar. Some of the differences is the Republicans, President Bush, was able to keep Indiana in his column. He kept Virginia in his column, North Carolina, Florida. Those were the states that he was able to keep into his column that are over and above the 10 states that normally vote Republican. Okay, so this was the first Clinton election. The second Clinton election, the map looks a little bit differently. This was with Bob Dole. Let's go back up and see the totals. Okay, so Robert Dole was the Senate Majority Leader. He retired and he became the presidential nominee for the Republicans. He ended up with 159 of the electoral votes, not quite 38 million popular votes. Clinton, 379 electoral votes, and a little over 45 million of the popular vote. So let's look at that now. Okay, in this one we see that Senator Dole was able to take the central and west states. Interestingly, he did not capture Arizona and New Mexico. He did get all of the South and Indiana, but not Florida. Okay, so let's move on to George W. Bush's election in the year 2000. So this was George W. Bush. There was no incumbent. He was on the Republican side. Al Gore was the vice president under Bill Clinton, who now was retired, and so he was the nominee for the Democrats. This was the closest election that we can imagine. As it turned out, and you can see right here, as it turned out, Florida was the controller of that election. Gore did take a little bit more in the popular votes. He had something on the order of 500,000 more popular votes than what the actual winner was. And if you remember, Florida had been called for the Democrats, and then it turned out that it was too close to call, and through the recount process and a Supreme Court decision, Florida ended up going into the Republican column, and that's what made George W. Bush win by 271 votes. Remember, it takes 270 to win. He had one more than necessary. Okay, but this is what the map looked like. So, as it turned out, there were no Democratic states in the South. Ohio went to the Republicans. Virginia, North Carolina, all of the South, and Florida, the deciding state, went to the Republicans. The central states all went Republican, and the western states, with the exception of New Mexico. The Pacific Coast went to the Democrats, as did the Midwest, with the exception of Indiana and Ohio. And then Pennsylvania and the Northeast states went to the Democrats, with the exception of New Hampshire. All right, so this was President Bush's first election. His second election was against John Kerry. John Kerry is the current Secretary of State. He was a senator from Massachusetts. He won on the Democratic side. He went up against George W. Bush, who was the incumbent now. Bush received, this was still a close election. Bush received 286 votes, though, however, so much more comfortable than his first election, and Kerry only received 251, 19 short of that magic number. And the popular vote was rather close, within 3 million votes, 62 million for Bush, 59 for Kerry. And let's look at the map. Well, as we can see, Bush was able to limit the election to completely the West Coast for the Democrats, the Midwest, and the Northeast. They were completely limited in their ability to break into the rest of the country. All right, so let's go to the Obama era. In the Obama era, let's see, the way this map is put together, I don't think it's going to show us the popular vote, just the electoral vote. So with it, Obama was able to break through some of the barriers that the Republicans had previously had. He was able to pick up 2 southern states, Virginia and North Carolina. He also picked up Florida, obviously another southern state. So those 3 were important wins for him. He also was able to make gains in the Midwest. He picked up Indiana, and he got 1 of the Nebraska votes. Remember, Nebraska is a state that can split its votes in the Electoral College. He picked up Colorado and New Mexico, also Nevada, and then the 3 Pacific states that generally go Democrat stayed with him. So we ended up with 359 votes on the Democratic side, 179 on the Republican side. And although this says Clinton and Trump, this is actually Obama and McCain. Okay, so that is what it looked like in 2008. Let's go on to 2012. Okay, so 2012, in this map, Obama was not able to continue to keep North Carolina. Otherwise, the map is rather similar. Well, he also was not able to keep Indiana. These were the 2 main changes in the map. I believe the rest was the same. So that made his total electoral vote count for Obama 332, and in this case he was running against Romney, and Romney had 206. Okay, so this is the 2012 election. So now we are back to this year, 2016. What will be the outcome in 2016? And in our next lesson, we will talk about how is it that we can begin to figure out before the election what the possibilities are. So I hope you will join me for that particular lesson. Have a great day.